Before I get started with the ranking, I will state that these are the only roller coasters I've ever been on as of this video's upload. Next year, I will have the opportunity to get to Cedar Point, Adventureland, and Lost Island, with a slight possibility of visiting Kings Island and Michigan's Adventure. So this list will be completely different next year. I also want to note that none of these rides are objectively terrible, in my opinion. At the number 25 spot, we have Pegasus at Mount Olympus. This coaster could be considered a fine family ride. I just found it to be rough and boring. All it really does is make dips and sharp turns. I had a promising ride in the morning, but I was reassured of its last place finish on my second ride. Mount Olympus would be better off tearing this ride down and replacing it with a Gravity Group family coaster. And don't even get me started on the final turn into the brake run. At number 24 is Mad Mouse at Valleyfair. Like Pegasus, this coaster is also kind of boring, mostly because it's trimmed to death. Unlike Pegasus, this coaster has some decent lateral forces and one great airtime moment. If you want to ride this, make sure you do so at the park opening because this ride has an atrocious capacity. Here at 23 is Pepsi Orange Streak at Nickelodeon Universe in the Mall of America. This ride has a very nice setting going around the park. Having two lift hills, it is a pretty long ride. It also pulls some decent positives and quick floater airtime pops. Other than that, it didn't really do much for me. I know it might seem low, but that's how I feel. Just know, this doesn't make it a bad ride. At number 22, we have our first inverting roller coaster on this list, and that is Corkscrew at Valleyfair. It's a fine ride with a basic layout. It's got that classic aero profiling, but that doesn't bother me at all. I would have it much higher, but it seemed to run really rough this year. Maybe it was the profiling, I don't know. But this doesn't deserve to be the only coaster with inversions at Valleyfair. At number 21, we have Cyclops at Mount Olympus. I would compare it closest to Pegasus at the same park, but better. I never got to ride it when it gave the crazy airtime, so I was a little disappointed when I got off. It did still have some nice laterals, and that one crazy drop at the end still gave crazy airtime. If it wasn't for that, it would be much lower on my list. Rounding out the 20s at the 20th spot is Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts at Universal Studios. For me, the main draw here is that it's not much of a coaster. This ride has a great show that lasts the entire ride. I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but I was able to understand the storyline. If it was more like a normal coaster, I'm sure it would have been much higher. Going into the 10s at number 19 is High Roller at Valleyfair. I've never experienced this ride in the very back rows, so I don't know how good the airtime is back there. Even sitting in the middle or front rows, I've still gotten some good airtime on those return hills. There's nothing much in the positive or lateral department, but it's still a fun ride. Here at number 18 is Timber Twister at Spirit Mountain in Minnesota. The best part about this ride is that you can go whatever speed you'd like. The ride also starts right out of the station and winds down a twisty layout full of high lateral turns and an ejector-filled double down, which I never expected from a mountain coaster. There's just not too much positive force, but this ride has a nice setting twisting around the trees. At number 17 is Boomerang at Elitch Gardens. This ranking may come as a surprise to some of you, but I didn't think it was that bad. This was my first time experiencing inversions backwards, so I got off a little dizzy. It's only lower for me because of the restraints, and it was running kind of rough. However, I came off thinking it was pretty intense. At the 16th spot is Fairly Odd Coaster at Nickelodeon Universe at the Mall of America. This ride is a smooth experience with lots of spinning, even with the weight split evenly. That makes me wonder how wild it would be with an uneven weight distribution. I found that the trims on this ride barely hit 2. I might be biased here because this was my first roller coaster ever. At number 15, we have Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom in Florida. This ride is advertised to be going at 27 miles an hour, but because of the dark setting, it feels way faster and crazier. The lift hill also looks cool as you see the astronauts around you upside down and the other train climbing its lift hill. This ride definitely feels crazier than it would be if it was in an outdoor setting. In my 14th spot is Zeus at Mount Olympus. This might seem very low for some people, but this ride was surprisingly rough on my ride earlier this year. It was still the smoothest in the park, but nowhere near as smooth as people made it out to be. It wasn't really the roughness that took the experience away from me, though. I got two rides on this, and I got stapled on the first turnaround both times, so that kind of took away the airtime I could have gotten in the second half. At the number 13 spot is Avatar Airbender at Nickelodeon Universe at the Mall of America. There's nothing much to say about this ride. I would say it's a mild version of Steel Venom at Valley Fair. One thing it does have above Steel Venom is the spinning aspect. There's not much of it, but it does add to the thrill. It does provide some nice floater airtime on those spikes and some positives hitting the launches. However, it is still not the best coaster in the park. That honor belongs to SpongeBob SquarePants Rock Bottom Plunge at my number 12 spot. This ride was built into a very compact area of the park, and I think the layout works for it. You do get a nice view of the park from the top of the lift hill. I like how it slows down at the top. It really builds suspense. People say this ride is pretty rough, but I got one smooth ride in the morning and one rough ride in the afternoon, both in the back, so I think it depends on the train you sit in. Number 11 may come as a very big surprise, but it's Mind Eraser at Elitch Gardens. When I was going to ride this thing, I was expecting the worst. When I saw those restraints, I thought it was going to erase my mind with all the headbanging. I came off thinking it was way smoother than everyone had made it out to be. I asked my dad, who was sitting right next to me and has a low tolerance for roughness, what he thought, and he said the exact same thing. Those restraints did take away some of the ride experience, but at least it wasn't rough. On top of that, this ride is pretty intense with some very whippy inversions. I'm very surprised I enjoyed it as much as I did. Starting off my top 10 is Steel Venom at Valley Fair. This ride pulls some intense positives going up into the spikes and leveling out. The backwards launch into the vertical spike is something that gets me every time. I really love the floating sensation you get going up and down on those spikes. To my surprise, the whole ride, including the launches, was really smooth. Of course, the holding brake is something really special because it keeps you face down pressing into the restraint. Don't pass up this one at Valley Fair. Starting off in the single digits at the number 9 spot is Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind at Epcot. I know I knocked Escape from Gringotts down because it wasn't much of a coaster. This ride is definitely more of a coaster than that ride. This ride has a bunch of twists and turns while the train spins in a way that you can see all the props that you should see. It's a very long ride with a great story around it and a backwards launch. It has everything I want out of a Disney coaster. At number 8 is Excalibur at Valley Fair. There was a comment on the official POV that really did summarize this ride quite well. It said that Excalibur is one of those backyard coasters on steroids. With that, I 100% agree. This ride is overall really intense while delivering great underrated airtime moments. Even with the trim on the first drop, it doesn't really take away from the airtime you get on it. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Aero profiling doesn't really bother me, and that certainly applies to this ride. Here at the lucky number 7 is Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios, Florida. This is a smooth ride that delivers some surprising airtime moments. The best part of this ride is choosing your song for the ride. This ride is also really smooth. Most people had said it was rough, but I found that not to be the case. The mid-course brake runs don't really hit at all, but they really are buzzkills. At the number 6 spot is Wild Thing at Valley Fair. Hear me out, hear me out. This ride has gotten better over time. Even earlier this year, it wasn't running as great as it was during my last rides this past October. I can't believe I'm saying this, but this ride actually gave airtime on all of the final hills, and I didn't have to push myself up like I normally did. The only downside is that it didn't have too much power in the high parts of that turnaround. However, the last left turn before the mid-course was pretty intense. I'm proud to finally say that Wild Thing was a great ride. Beginning my top 5, we have Expedition Everest at Animal Kingdom in Florida, my highest ranked Disney coaster. This ride was boatloads of fun, even for a family coaster. I was blown away with the amount of theming on this ride. It was a very long ride that never seemed to end. There was always something going on around you. The complete darkness inside of the mountain led to a chaotic experience that always surprised me. It wasn't overly intense, but it didn't need to be. Just missing my top 3 at the number 4 spot is Incredible Hulk at Islands of Adventure. I will just say that this ride is intense, really intense. The transitions into each element were really snappy. Every element felt as if it was yanking you through them. I never really knew what graying out on a roller coaster meant at the time I rode this, but I'm sure I did. At the number 3 spot is Renegade at Valley Fair. This ride tries to give airtime in every spot possible. Those drops off of the high bank turns were the highlight. The twists and turns pulled great laterals and positives. This ride may be really rough, but my tolerance for roughness is very high, so it didn't bother me. That first drop is just enhanced in the back row. Go out to Valley Fair and experience this ride. At my number 2 spot is Hades 360 at Mount Olympus. Like I said with Renegade, I can handle a rough ride. However, there are a couple moments that jackhammer the teeth out of me. Other than that, I really have nothing bad to say about this ride. It gives great airtime everywhere on the train. Even though the corkscrew is made to be the signature part of this ride, my favorite parts are the underground sections. I was fortunate enough to have the lights off in there, and it was pure bliss. Actually, the whole ride is pure bliss. What am I even talking about? Easily taking the number 1 spot is Velocicoaster at Islands of Adventure. If you knew that I've ridden this, you knew that it would be number 1 when you started this video. I have absolutely nothing even slightly negative to say about this experience. The locker system is great and the ops have incredibly fast dispatches. The theming in the queue and during the ride is nothing short of amazing. I got stuck in line once for 3 hours due to rain, and I didn't mind because I knew that it was awesome. Every element pops in different ways. You get intense forces in every direction. Every inversion on this ride was not like anything I had experienced before. Don't even get me started on the stall in the Mosasaurus roll. This is the only coaster on this list I predict will stay in my top 25 for all time. So that was my top 25. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you making it through my first video of this kind. I know it was kinda bad, but please excuse that. This is my list, not yours. Please don't take any offense to this. Post your opinion below if you'd like, and I'll see you in the next one.